social media has helped strongman leaders using their populist rhetoric get democratically elected. And then after they're democratically elected, as Hitler and Stalin were democratically elected, they then took the levers of power and crumbled the institutions from within. And it is, it's death by a thousand cuts.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Maria Ressa, Filipino-American journalist, CEO of Rappler.com, who along with Russian journalist and editor of Novaya Gazeta, Dmitry Muratov, has just been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the first time the two journalists since 1936, almost a whole century ago, have been awarded the Peace Prize. And I will quote from what the Nobel Committee said: Maria Ressa used freedom of expression to expose abuse of power, use of violence, and growing authoritarianism in her native country, the Philippines. And that free, independent, and fact-based journalism serves to protect against abuse of power, lies, and war propaganda. Maria, your Twitter bio reads, idealist, skeptic, pragmatist, journalist, author, and let me add, a thorn in your government side. So Maria Ressa, welcome to ThePrint. And on behalf of all my journalists at ThePrint, and I dare say with some confidence, all of India's journalists, my journalistic fraternity, that we are very, very proud that you have won the Nobel Prize, a journalist, a fellow Asian. Welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you for having me. And, this is for all of us. I think that the Nobel Committee wanted to shine the light on exactly how difficult it is to be a journalist today.
Right. So, on your Twitter bio, I was reading that you've written a book that's scheduled to come out in a few months called How to Stand Up to a Dictator. Now, that's a wonderful title. So tell me, how did you, write a book like this? And I think let's share some ideas on what's going on in the Philippines and perhaps in my country in India as well.
Yeah. Look, I first I have to say I'm not a radical person. I am an old broadcast journalist who I came of age at the time. 1986 was the first time I became a reporter when people power happened in the Philippines, when movements for democracy made it seem like democracy was going to take over the world. Francis Fukuyama was extremely optimistic about it. And now at the tail end of my career, I am really shocked to kind of see the pendulum, from authoritarian one-man rule, which is how in Southeast Asia, that was how I began working for CNN. I was covering the shift from authoritarian one-man rule to democracy. And now at the tail end, that seems to be swinging back. And that is a trend globally, and I would actually peg 2014 as a crucial year for democracy and for journalists, because it was when the Ukraine happened and you had dual realities there, when social media was used there as well by Russian disinformation networks. Modi was elected in India in 2014. Joko Widodo, or Jokowi, barely squeaked by Prabowo Subianto in Indonesia. So something happened in 2014. The gatekeepers, journalists, lost our gatekeeping powers to technology. And technology platforms, these American social media platforms, took the money, but they abdicated responsibility for the public sphere. So that was the beginning of this kind of upside down world that I think journalists now have to deal with. The dangers to us have increased. The title came out of trying to figure out how can I take the 35 years I've been a journalist and what lessons have I learned? And in the last 5 years specifically, under the Duterte administration, where we've faced, a brutal drug war, a battle for truth, where the first casualty was exactly how many people have been killed in this drug war, because, in plain view, the government would say, the police would say, 7,000 people have been killed. And then like 2 months later, they would roll it back to, it's only 2,000 plus, because they were incompetent enough to announce the numbers they were keeping track of. And then when they realized that it received global condemnation and got them in trouble, they rolled it back in plain sight. And here's where I think we have things in common. The 3 C's: corrupt, coerce, co-opt.
Mhm.
And this happened in every sector of society. And, you know, once President Duterte came in, it's a feudalistic, patronage-driven style of politics that has weakened every single institution that this administration has touched. And, you know, what we've seen, at least in terms of media, is that if you challenge power, it's a vindictive power. And while Rappler wasn't the first attacked by President Duterte, it was first the largest newspaper, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and then the largest broadcaster, which I had managed that news group for 6 years, the ABS-CBN.
Right.
They have lost their franchise to operate, right? Just last year, the kind of rubber stamp legislature just took it away from them. And the last time that happened was under martial law, under Ferdinand Marcos. And then finally, we were third attacked, but we're small and we're owned by journalists. You know, we created Rappler precisely to be independent. And we just keep doing our jobs. And I think the other part is we refuse to give up our rights. We refuse to play in the 3 Cs. And I think we did the right thing.
You know, let's talk a little bit about this era of strongmen that you said. You know, Duterte came to power. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been elected for the second time again 2 years ago. Then in Brazil, you had Jair Bolsonaro. Donald Trump, of course, sort of epitomized, you know, this whole era. He's of course no longer president. Then in Hungary, you had Viktor Orban. But what is interesting about all these leaders, Maria, I think, is that they're all democratically elected. And And then, you know, so it's not as if they've come to power on the back of a martial law or the army. They're all, elected leaders. They're Democrats, and then something happens.
This is all connected, right? And let's start. I think what the Nobel Committee did is spotlight how much this time we are living through is very similar to the last time a journalist won the Nobel Prize. It was the rise of Nazism. That journalist languished in a Nazi concentration camp. And, you know, World War II happened. And then after World War II, after an atom bomb literally, you know, changed the world came together and they created the United Nations. They created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I keep saying that this time is like having an atom bomb explode in our information ecosystem and requires that same kind of multilateral, multi-sectoral approach to come up with new principles that will govern the internet, which is insidiously manipulating our minds. And you know, a business model called surveillance capitalism, using the data we have, creating models of each of us that know us better than we know ourselves. It is getting rid of some of the basic human rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I think that's the first step, is the parallels, right? We are at a moment, the reason why these strongman rulers, look, I mean, someone like Viktor Orban took power before the age of social media, just barely before. Someone like Turkey, Erdogan took power in 2002, and yet he used social media to consolidate, right? So that social media has helped strongman leaders using their populist rhetoric get democratically elected. And then after they're democratically elected, as Hitler and Stalin were democratically elected, they then took the levers of power and crumbled the institutions from within. And it is, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts because it's so small. The movement towards, I debated this in the title of the book, and, you know, how to stand up to a dictator, but really we're seeing fascism rise again. And if we don't sound the alarm, we could lose all of it. And I guess the last part is that I always keep saying that facts are the cornerstone of everything. And what the social media platforms have done is, in their choices for algorithmic distribution, they treat lies and facts identically and actually favor the spread of lies laced with horrible emotion, anger, and hate over really boring facts. So here's the reality we live in. The almost 3.2 billion who are on some kind of Facebook platform, the YouTube that is out there. We're living at a time when facts are debatable. And if you don't have facts, you don't have truth. The algorithms of these platforms tear us apart, play right into the us against them rhetoric of these types of strongman leaders. And when they tear us apart, without facts, you don't have a shared reality where you can begin to discuss civic actions, right? Civil society and democracy now is like a man-to-man and woman-to-woman defense because of the information ecosystem that we have. And my biggest worry is that it's torn down trust. And that's also not good for the government, for a democratic government, because everything moves with the speed of trust. If you don't have trust, I mean,
but trust in what?
You can't
trust
do
in
anything.
Institutions, trust in what?
Trust in facts. Trust in facts. How do you begin, right? You agree on the facts that this is a can of Coke Zero, right? Because if someone else is saying, no, that's a can of vodka, then think about that in a peace process negotiation or in a political debate, right? If we can't agree on the basic facts, we cannot agree on anything. And the world is facing such existential problems. How are we going to solve climate change?
But Maria, the thing is that all these leaders a lot of all these leaders are also very popular. I mean, Duterte has, his ratings have fallen, but I know that Prime Minister Modi only gets more popular. Now, you can argue that he doesn't have you don't have a real opposition in India, but that's not the point. So what that does also then is that in the 7 years he's been prime minister, he hasn't held a single press conference, with journalists like us. But the fact remains that he is a very popular prime minister.
But can I ask you a question? How? I mean, because the other thing and this is something we struggled with in the Philippines, statistical surveys, when you live in an environment of violence and fear, they also chart the rise of dictatorships, right? When you look at, say, Venezuela. So statistical surveys in the age of big data and the age of social media aren't as true a barometer as it used to be. So I'm curious, because if Modi and the BJP does use, at least all the reports show that there are information operations that are being used to manipulate the public sphere, to manipulate the electorate. How do you know?
Well, we don't know if they do or they don't. There's a lot of assumption, right, that they are doing this, and there's a sort of a lot of accusations, if you like, against the government, but nobody knows for sure. And in that, in an oral civilization like ours, and I assume like in the Philippines, and lots of us in Asia are like that. We are a feudal people. We are 75 years, we've been an independent nation, but we're still quite feudal. We believe our leaders. We trust them.
Right.
And that's why I think the role of the media becomes so much more important. But you're right. When facts are contested, then that becomes, even more important, right? Is that who do you believe?
And that's exactly why the platforms then, when it becomes a behavior modification system, you can use information operations to change reality in people's minds. It gives government, which already has tremendous power, even greater power. I think that's the game changer for all of us. So, asking questions of Modi. We've been banned from the palace since 2018. And, I don't report from the palace, but President Duterte banned me as well as our palace reporter. It's the excesses of power, and it makes the journalists, our jobs all around the world, that much harder, because the platform of delivery, the world's largest delivery platform for news, is Facebook. And their algorithms are biased against facts. So how do we, so this is part of the reason I know this is because we have the data. That's, it's publicly available, and we chart it. And that has me so worried, because the other thing that it's doing is it is bringing out the worst of human nature. Women in the Philippines are attacked at least 10 times more than men. There are women journalists in the United States, in the Philippines, and other parts of the world who decide it's not worth it, and they leave journalism. They leave politics. And that's also a worrying trend. Anyway, I'll shut up. But
no, but listen, the idea is to make you talk. But I'll tell you, for example, ThePrint where I work and the Rappler where you're the head of. Now we are websites, we are digital media outlets. But you have huge legacy papers in India. I'm not going to name them, but they're perhaps amongst the largest newspapers in the world in any language, right? They have TV channels. They have I think they're there everywhere. But a lot of journalists in these organizations do not speak to truth to power. You're talking about speaking truth to power. But so the point I'm trying to make is that journalists are also complicit. It's not a one-way street, right?
Yeah. I mean, those are my 3 C's: corrupt, coerce, co-opt. Right? Corrupt, coerce, co-opt. But the thing is, you pay for that. Your nation pays for that. And that, I hope, is part of what we're realizing. Although in the Philippines, we're now in the 5th year of a 6-year term for President Duterte, and we have a lot at stake in elections, but at least we're seeing more independence from institutions, from politicians, from journalists.
Right. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You have several arrest warrants against you. I believe one cyber libel case has just fallen off the map, but there are others. So, tell me how many arrest warrants do you have, and how do you deal with this stuff? How do you deal with fear?
How do I deal with?
How do you deal with fear that somebody is going to come and get you?
Look, I think the Philippine government wanted to make an example of me, because that's kind of the way, if I look at the leadership style of President Duterte, it's creating in Tagalog, sasampulan. You make an example of someone. So in business, there was a businessman who he singled out early on, who had a publicly listed company. That company bottomed out. In politicians, he singled out Senator Laila de Lima, who was doing the investigations in the drug war killings. She was arrested in February 2017, and she's serving her 5th year in prison now, right? Jailed without pretty much on the testimony of convicts. And then I'm the cautionary tale for journalists. And I've had 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. The Philippine government filed 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years. And let's see, out of the 9 cases that we had at the start of the year, we've had 2 dropped. So for every case I have, Rappler has a case. But there was one point when I had 10 and Rappler had 9. So that even happened. The cases are ludicrous, and they're politically motivated. And I will fight them in court.
So, so like I said, aren't you afraid, even as you're sitting in your office, but aren't you worried that they're going to come and get you anytime, right?
Yeah, there are moments, but so I'll try not to be, it's hard. You get used to it. And the way I dealt with it the first time when it happened, one of the arrest warrants just this year, I left my home because I didn't want to get arrested in the middle of the night and not have anyone know what would happen, right? So you have to think through worst case scenarios. I kind of made an exercise of it, which can be weirdly fun. You think through worst case scenarios, embrace your fear. Whatever it is that I was most afraid of, I tried to imagine it, touch it, and then rob it of its sting. And then when it gets to that point, I workflow. If it's organizational, I come out with a workflow and we drill the workflow. So when our reporter, Pia Renada, was banned from the palace, a few days earlier, we had just drilled a workflow for how every Rappler, if they're intimidated, what is the fastest way to go live? And we broke it down into steps, and then we did it. So it's like muscle memory. I think the other thing is, I believe, and maybe foolishly so, that a lot of this is meant to just intimidate me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do that, because, and that's where it goes in your head, right? You have to find a balance between fighting that battle inside your emotions and your mind, because if you conquer that there, almost everything is, then you're golden. But the other part of preparing the organization, because I'm not alone, that's the other part. And it helps that there are four of us, four women, who are the co-founders of Rappler, and we kind of had a pact with each other. Only one of us can be afraid at a time, and then we rotate it.
So this week it's not you because you won the Nobel Prize. But this, but
fear. So fear does one thing, right? Fear makes you act, and what we do is we take that and act in a way that allows us to keep doing what we're doing, which means you put preparations in place. So we're kind of ready for any worst case scenarios. And I always joke, we have plan A, plan B, plan C. Sometimes I go to plan D, because you never know, but you plan it, and like a Gantt chart, you tick it off. And then you feel better, because it is about how you feel. And then you keep going. And I think all of that, we communicate this to our team. You get exhausted. If you're working for a small news group, we do a lot more than I used to do when I was a broadcast journalist, because I used to have a team of 4 people just for everything. So I came of age at the golden age of television broadcasting, and now it's different, And so what we try to do is balance, and we also use the attacks to unite our group. When the government tried to shut us down in January 2018, they tried to revoke our license to operate. We fought back, and we never stopped operating. But what we did is I held a general assembly. We're about a little over 100 people. And I offered my team, anyone there who wanted to leave, I was like, tell us, because this is a different ballgame. Not everyone has a different risk appetite. And, they're young. Our median age is 23 years old. So I was like, if your parents are worried, if you want to leave, let us know, and we will help find you a place in another news group. In 2018, it was easy to place people, Rappler, somewhere else. Not one journalist took that, and what it did is managing Rappler has been relatively easy during the times when we're under attack, because it is that 3 musketeers, all for one for all. It's incredible, actually.
Right. But you hear sometimes, and you hear it from journalists all around you, that hey, I can't be so critical of the government because the stakes are so high, right? There's so much money involved in my organization, or if I do a story, we might shut down. So I'm sure you've had that coming at you.
Yeah, we're different in the sense that we had no business to protect. The owners of Rappler are journalists, and we were old enough that, we knew the role. We knew money was important because we made just enough to keep payroll, right? And actually, it was really the idea that we have to keep doing our jobs. And if anything, our investigative reports we did more, as other news groups did less. So we did more. We just did, we spent 8 months now with the OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, to look at the links between 4 men: President Duterte, his Chinese advisor, Michael Yang, his aide, now Senator Bongo, and a government bureaucrat named Chris Lau, who used to work for Bongo, but who was the official who gave the deals, the pandemic deals, to these companies. So there's a corruption investigation going on now with the Senate, and those documents we dumped into our information ecosystem. I guess I'm saying that that wasn't a concern for Rappler. We knew, and the only thing I asked my co-founders, because at a certain point I was talking, I thought that we needed to keep shining the light. And there was a certain point from the end of 2018 to 2020 where I was traveling all over the world trying to alert other journalists, other democracies, that this is coming, that this is going to happen to you. And you didn't need to be alerted because you were already living through it with us. But 36 times. That's how many different permissions to travel I got from the courts that had arrest warrants against me, 36 times in really from 2019 to 2020. That's a lot of travel. And all I asked my co-founders, I said, go do hold power to account. Because if we didn't, it's an inflated, I'm cautious that I don't want to sound like it's an overinflated sense of what we're doing. But I really felt like we needed to hold power to account because they were making it absolutely impossible to do that. We would put in for Freedom of Information Act, FOI, like documents. We would get some, but most of the time it wouldn't be given. It was blatant. The ombudsman refused to release. Actually, they refused to release the salaries and the annual declaration of every government official, so you could see whether their assets have increased. Anyway, what a long answer to no, we didn't think about that, because frankly, I was already on a collision course when we decided that we would continue reporting. You continue reporting, and you'd better do a really good job at it, because I felt, and look at the options available, right? Let's say 2018, early 2018, after they tried to shut us down. You negotiate.
Right.
Or you keep going. Those are the two paths ahead of you, right? And what do you negotiate? If you were to negotiate, you would be asked to tone it down or to toe the line, right? Why would I do that? I'm old. And the reason we set up Rappler is impact, the mission of journalism. So once we made the call to turn right, I was like, we got to follow it. And then we just had to protect ourselves in the way we could. But we knew that we were just going to keep doing investigative reporting. And that's every time we did do one. Like, part of the reason our reporter was banned from the palace is because we showed a connection in a corruption scandal to a purchase of a Navy frigate. So yeah, it's not, you either do your job or you don't. I think, and maybe that's also because I'm in a position of, I'm privileged. I earned enough money with the time that I had been with CNN. I didn't have to, I was the last generation of foreign correspondents. The network will pay for your home, pay for what you need, and when they move you. Those things I'm not so sure happen anymore, but I lived through the golden age and I had enough savings that I could actually do what I wanted to do. And I left the largest network, I lost a lot. All of us, the four co-founders, lost a lot of money in that. So I felt like, we either are going to do this, because Rappler is a lot of work. Right. So you either do it with integrity or you don't, and you move on. So I at a certain point, I felt like if they're going to close us and shut us down, then do it. I mean, do you see what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to pretend. It's kind of like when I was arrested at the airport after getting off a 14-hour flight from San Francisco, when I found out they issued an arrest warrant as the doors closed of this long haul flight, right? And I get out, and they read me my Miranda rights. There's 6 cops. They're there. And then they ask me to put my jacket to put my hands together and put my jacket on top of it. And I go, why? Why should I do that? And they were like, well, ma'am, we're supposed to handcuff you according to our processes. So, we don't want to do that. So can you put your jacket around your hands? And I almost blew a gasket. I was like, no, I'm not going to pretend for you. You actually have to do it if you want to do it. I'm not going to pretend. And these are the things that make me angry. I'm not going to cooperate. The Constitution says, here's the line where my rights begin and yours ends. This is what the Constitution gives to journalists and gives to Filipinos, and I will demand my rights.
So actually, it's quite simple, Maria, isn't it, at the end of the day? Is that you have to just do your job every day. And so there's no time to be afraid, I think. Your editors, at least my editor, will take care of that. But I think as journalists, you have to just keep doing what you have to do every day.
Absolutely. And that, in the age of the internet, takes all of your energy. Because look, you take 2 phones, you're trying to figure out, you take this, you can automatically transcribe it. There's so many more things. being a reporter today is very different from when I was starting as a reporter. And I want our reporters not just to have the form or the logistics of journalism, but also the thinking, right? I always used to say being a reporter is the best job in the world because you're tested intellectually, you're tested physically. You're not going to sleep if you're in the middle of a breaking news story or you're in the middle of a war zone. You're tested morally. How many times I received my first potential bribe from someone who was a friend of mine who offered a large sum of money. And it's that first one that you have to say no to, because if you say no to that, then everything else is easy. You go down a path. So morally, spiritually. And then I think the last one is what? Physical, intellectual, physical, spiritual, moral, spiritual and moral, right? Because it tests who you are and you define the values. And by the time the Duterte administration started attacking me and Rappler, I already knew who I was. I already knew I had helped write standards and ethics manuals of 4 different news organizations. So I knew the right path. And then I just kept walking down, and this is where it wound up,
Yeah, well, I'm, in fact, I'm a couple of years older than you in journalism, which is why I have all this white hair. But, just to come back to what you were talking earlier about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, and the relationship between, old-fashioned journalism that we grew up with and what the kind of work we're doing now. We're both with digital media outlets. And I was quite interested in what Zuckerberg said. I think you said that 97% of journalism is sort of, perhaps affected by social media and particularly by Facebook. And he said, well, it's about freedom of choice, whether you read or you don't have to read, or whether you go through Facebook or not. And what about the 3%? I mean, what would you say to that?
Actually, so what I said was I was trying to get him to understand how powerful Facebook was, because if you're a journalist, that's how you get your sense of mission, right? You work for a powerful news organization, and then you're humbled by that power, because you're responsible for that. And in that one, we were having lunch on the sidelines of the F8. This was 2017. And I invited him to come to the Philippines because I was telling him how powerful it is. And he said, at that point, at least 97% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. So Facebook is our internet. And now it's 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook, right? But at that point it was 97%. And he said, he paused and he had the quizzical look and he asked, where's the other 3%? And I laughed then, but now I understand growth at all costs, company over country. This is, the latest book by the New York Times reporter. That was their motto. Company over country. You can't, that's like the greed is good, of the
free market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But this is wrong when you're protecting the public sphere. So I guess that's what I make of it. Look at where we are today. Look at the fact that this year, the Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project said that cheap armies on social media are rolling back democracy in 81 countries around the world. And we've watched that grow since 2017. So I don't think he wants to live in a fascist world, right? So I hope that I continue to appeal for enlightened self-interest. And that's what we're seeing from the whistleblowers coming out now, who are saying exactly what we have said, that the company, that Mark Zuckerberg, who has he's like the king of Facebook because he owns the shares, makes decisions that make profit over the safety of its users. And every user should know that. But this is where regulation should come in.
Which is what Frances Haugen said when she, in her testimony. But, what is interesting is that in India, the government, in fact, has summoned social media like Twitter and Facebook, because in January this year, there was a riot, and then there were messages on Twitter. And so social media, the argument being that social media cannot do what it does. But it sort of cuts both ways, doesn't it? Because when your social sphere is so controlled, then perhaps social media is an outlet for freedom of speech.
It's both, right? And it was, so at the beginning, Rappler began on Facebook. If Facebook's search was better, I may not have even created a website in 2012. So 2011 was when I was testing it. We actually began, so the company began in August 2011, and we began as a Facebook page,
right?
Move PH, right? So I know its
Power.
strengths, but then it got too greedy. And this is where you go to surveillance capitalism, to the business model, to this insidious manipulation, to the point that it has now become, and this is social media in general, that they are behavior modification systems. And we are being treated like Pavlov's dogs. That's, then you go back to what are the moral responsibilities? So I think it's pivotal. It's at a pivotal moment. Will money win? I don't know. But that's also part of the reason over the last 2 years, especially during the lockdown, I've spent a lot of time, with international groups trying to put guardrails. So I'm part of the Real Facebook Oversight Board with Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote Surveillance Capitalism, and then Carol Cadwalader, who broke the Cambridge Analytica story. So many Roger McNamee, who was an early investor in Facebook. He probably was the first whistleblower. I mean, think about how many already. Roger McNamee wrote Zuck, Christopher Wiley, Cambridge Analytica, Sophie Zhang, and Frances Haugen. There will be more, so is this going to take as long as the fight against big tobacco, where it's harmful to you, but you're still making so much money that you won't stop? I hope not. I really hope for enlightened self-interest. But how does it impact countries like yours and mine? The impact is huge, because it's like drugs into our minds. And it changes our perspective of the world. And then here's the last part. I think about it like this, right? The algorithmic amplification is the problem. Algorithmic distribution and the principles they put in place, like the fact that they make it so it is as addictive, the principles of addiction in gambling, that, it is our biology that it plays with. But I think I get hyper on these things, I appeal to conscience. That's the other part.
Yeah. Well, I think just a couple of questions for you, Maria, because I know that you're running out of, we're both running out of time, but so.
Thank you, by the way, for moving. It's been like a crazy last few days.
No worries. No worries at all. But, you said something which was quite interesting. I was reading, and you said that all around the world, digital authoritarians are using a scorched earth policy to get elected. So just to get back and connect that with good old fashioned journalism, which is to speak truth to power, or to hold the line, which I know is a phrase it's almost like a slogan for you. But, how do you connect these things?
What's the scorched earth policy, right? And I'll say it from the Philippines, and I think it's very similar tactics in India. What the government's propaganda machine does is it's like it creates a mob, sometimes real, sometimes fake, right? But what they do is they have created a propaganda machine that is meant to inflame, to incite anger and hate, and then to take a half truth and twist it to the narrative that they want. So think about Facebook as it's like toxic sludge of anger and hate. So here's what's happening to each individual in our societies who are on this platform. In a battle for conscience, and I'll talk about it from a personal perspective, right? There's this old cartoon where, there's a devil on your shoulder and an angel on your shoulder. And they both whisper in your ear, you want something, here's someone bribing you. And then, you think the devil says, go take it. No one will know. No one will know. And then there's the angel that says, no, you will know, and it's a battle, and the battlefield is you. It's your conscience. And what social media has done is this: they gagged the angel So the angel is just sitting on your shoulder. And then along with these types of populist leaders, they made the devil, like they amplified the devil. And they actually said, because the leader says it's okay, this devil is what you hear. And then you're in this environment like a casino where it's geared, it's set up for you to react, to think fast, not slow, right? So I think what is happening to us today, to humanity, is that these social media platforms are bringing out the worst of humanity, enabling the rise of leaders who use us against them, who use violence and hate. And this is part of the reason we led to, I mean, again, we go back to history. That was the rise of fascism, right? And look at the millions who died in these places. I don't want it to happen again. And it's part of the reason I'm scared that it will happen again. And the last part is I am scared that the goodness of human nature, the resilience of people, right? The part that you can't quantify intellectually, but you know there is good. Like, this is the other reason Rappler has survived, through the goodness of human nature.
So did you say all this to Mark Zuckerberg when you met him?
Oh no, I don't think I would have been given that much time, this, and I'm not so sure I knew it all. I knew, this is something you live your way into. And then I began to realize, oh my God, what is the next generation going to look like? That the fact that, men and women have been unleashed to attack each other.
Mm-hmm.
When is that good? Right? So anyway, I'll shut up. I'm an idealist on these. I still believe in the goodness of human nature. You have to, because that's also the part, like if you cover disasters, right? And I know you have, India has had so many. There is goodness and how people come together. And I don't want that taken away. And I think that if our information ecosystem is poisoned in the way it is, this is emergent behavior. So that's what I'm worried about. So I think that's what the Nobel Committee has realized. And that this is a moment that it just said, we have to look at this as a world.
And so you hold the line.
I hope. I try. We try.
That's right. We all try. On this note, Maria, thank you so much for your time. And we wish you all the best in everything that you do. We hope Rappler sort of, grows and grows and like ThePrint. And we hope that we can collaborate actually in the coming weeks and months. But thank you again for
Thank you.
speaking to ThePrint.
Thanks so much.